Nexus. What's going on, guys? I'm Aaron from PhoneDog.com, and that's the chant that's been going on, at least I think that's the chant that's been going on amongst Android users, at least diehard Android users across the nation. The Google Nexus S, newest Android Google Experience device in the United States after the Nexus 1, second Google branded device, and it's made by Samsung. We're going to pit it together against the HTC EVO 4G. Even though it's been out for 6 months, still one of the hottest devices on the market today. Which one will win in the dogfight? This one has a 4.3-inch display. 4-inch display here, but higher resolution. 5-megapixel camera, 8-megapixel camera. Sprint's 4G doesn't support T-Mobile's 4G. Which one will win? We'll find out. But first, special thanks to our friends at Best Buy. They hook us up with devices. They hook us up with two of these so we can give them to you in the One-Paw Bandit game. So special thanks to them because that's pretty cool. And when you go in, you walk out working. So when you get this Nexus S, you don't have to deal with any sort of walking out not understanding the phone. You walk out working. Enough of that. Let's get into the dogfight. HTC EVO 4G, Google Nexus S, Android battle. Which one will win? So surprise, it's two more Android devices, the Google Nexus S on T-Mobile, the HTC EVO 4G on Sprint. This one's been out for a while. Came out in June of this year. This one came out obviously a few weeks ago, but it's still considered one of the highest end devices on Sprint. So it's definitely, fair comparison between these two devices. Both are $199 on contract on a 2-year agreement. This one with T-Mobile, this one with Sprint, though you can't get this one in T-Mobile retail stores. You have to get it at Best Buy or at bestbuy.com. $529.99 full retail, $449.99 full retail. So, buying straight out, this one's a little bit cheaper, but this one, you may like the specs a little bit more. Let's do a quick rundown of the specs. 1 gigahertz Hummingbird processor, 5-megapixel camera. It's a 4-inch display and it's a contoured display. It doesn't really make a big difference in real life, but the pictures and of course on the site you see the contoured specs as well. But you can see it's not a huge difference. It's just a little bit contoured at the top and the bottom, and that makes it easier when you're on the phone. And they say it's a little bit more ergonomic, and it is, but it's not that huge of a deal. Not as big of a deal as Samsung is making it out to be, at least. So take it as you will. Anyway, front-facing camera, Android 2.3 Gingerbread, and it's a stock build. Not only is it Google's newest version of the operating system, of the Android operating system, but it's a stock build. So what you get out of the box is a completely vanilla version of Android. Now on the HTC EVO 4G, Android 2.2, 1 gigahertz Snapdragon processor, 8-megapixel rear camera with a dual LED flash and a kickstand on the back, front-facing camera, 1.3 megapixels, and then 4.3-inch display. Now it's important to note, 4.3-inch display, no special features to the display. It's not a Super AMOLED display, an AMOLED display, Super LCD, anything like that, but it's just a basic display. 4.3 inches though, so it's a bigger one. This one's only 4, but it's a Super AMOLED display, and when you compare the two, we'll get into this more in a minute, but when you compare the two, the colors are definitely crisper and more bright on the Nexus S. So something to consider. Now this one is running HTC's. You'll notice some differences here. This doesn't look at all like stock Android. Well, it's because it's not. It's running HTC's Sense user interface, and you can see from the top status bar all the way down to the bottom. You can see the HTC customizations that have been made to this device to make it a little bit more consumer friendly and all around friendlier out of the gate. I happen to prefer Sense. It's one of my favorite custom user interfaces. That said, for me, if I was to go into the store and buy, I'd probably buy the stock build of Android. For the first time Android buyer, first time smartphone owner, it's a nice transition between feature phone and new Android device. So I think it's designed with the consumer in mind, the average consumer in mind, and HTC did a very good job with their build. Don't you love it? Like, excuse me, like I haven't coughed in like 3 years, and as soon as I get on video I have to cough and sneeze and blow my nose and all kinds of crazy stuff like that. Anyway, so it has Android 2.2, Android 2.3, and you'll notice some minor changes, not just, in the fact that this is vanilla and has HTC Sense user interface, but you notice some minor changes in terms of design as well. But let's talk a little bit about individual designs first. The power button's on the right side of the Nexus S. On the left side you have your volume rocker, and it's all kind of black and flush with the actual phone, so it's kind of hard to tell. But you have your 5-megapixel camera on the back with a flash. And then you have your micro USB charging port and 3.5mm headphone jack on the bottom. Now on my Nexus S demo unit, let me wait for it to zoom in and see if you can see it. You can see the paint is already starting to chip a little bit above my micro USB charging port. Not, I don't know if it's just my unit or if that's a widespread thing, something you should worry about, but that's something to keep in mind. Then you have the EVO 4G here, and on the right side, you have your volume rocker. On the bottom, you have an HDMI port, micro USB charging port, 3.5mm headphone jack on the top, power button on the top, and then nothing on the left. One thing I have to fault both of these devices for, they don't have dedicated camera buttons. It's a minor thing, you may or may not care, but when you're holding it with shaky hands, it's much easier to tap while holding it stationary versus shaking hands and tapping it in the camera interface. So to talk a little bit about the actual user interfaces and go to those in depth a little bit more, let's take a look at vanilla or stock Android 2.3 or Gingerbread. In this case, first of all, you have 5 home screens, and you can see by clicking on the left or right side, you can bring up all 5, and you can directly click and go to the one you want to go to. And you'll see on the bottom here, as I'm over, for example, I'm on the furthest one left, I can click over here, go to the furthest one on the right, and migrate in between those pretty easily. Or I can just scroll back and forth from screen to screen. So it depends on what you want to do there. Now widget-wise, it is stock Android, so you'll see the widgets here. I have Advanced Task Killer installed, but you can see the standard Android widgets: analog clock, calendar, Facebook, Google Search. This has both of the Google Voice widgets out of the box. Latitude, market, music, news and weather for those people that like to keep track of the news. Never quite know what Lady Gaga or Miley Cyrus are doing. They might be acting a fool. So news and weather will help you keep up with that. Power control, picture frame, rate places, and then of course I have TweetDeck installed and Weather Channel. But for the rest, for that matter, they're stock Google widgets. And you can see I happen to be a fan of the news and weather widget. Here's what the weather one looks like, and then by clicking on it, you can get an idea of the forecast for the next 7 days. And then you can scroll through and see the news in the various categories as well. Now on the HTC EVO 4G, a little bit of a different setup, and you do get some HTC custom widgets, but I really like what HTC's done. They've taken it, they've really worked with it, and it's a really functional user interface on the EVO, well, on all the Sense devices, but particularly on the EVO 4G, thanks to the big display. First of all, it has 7 home screens, and you can see those by pinching in or out, clicking on one screen, pinching in or out, however you choose. This widget, the clock widget with the weather, that's a standard HTC Sense widget, and then you can see as I scroll over some widgets you didn't see on the Nexus S, things like the little widgets here, the agenda, and you can see when I click on it, we'll bring up those widgets and see analog clock, and it'll tell you whether they're stock Android widgets. For example, this analog clock, stock Android widget. When I go back in, you can see bookmarks, that's an HTC widget. So, and you can select, in certain cases like this, you can select the widget style, but you can see which ones are which. And if you want to go into the Android calendar widget, for example, we can click that. You can see it's a stock one, but you get the idea. You can choose which one you like. But that said, they've done a really good job. HTC has things like FriendStream, or it's a social aggregator of sorts where you can bring in your MySpace, your Facebook, your Twitter accounts, and see your FriendStream, hence the name FriendStream. Latitude, of course, market messages, like their Messages app a lot. You can see the widget style there, or you can pick this widget style, and then you can scroll down. NASCAR, if that's your thing. Photo frame, picture frame, power control, Sprint Football Live, Sprint TV, and then of course all the programs you've installed throughout the time you've owned the device. If they have widgets, they're in here as well. So pretty cool on that front. But let's jump right into messaging. Let's see what the keyboards are like, and we'll jump in here. And you can see here's a new message on the EVO. Now I've cheated a little bit and installed. I happen to be a big fan of Motorola's multi-touch keyboard. I've cheated a little bit and installed that one, so I've been using that one for a couple of weeks while I've been working with the device. But this is the one you're going to see out of the box, the touch input. It's HTC's keyboard. Whereas on the Nexus S, you'll see that this is what the stock keyboard looks like. And then of course I have some alternatives on this one as well. You can see input method. I've installed Smart Keyboard Pro and Swift Key. Android 2.3, this is the stock Android keyboard. It's the replacement of the one that came on 2.1 and 2.2. You may like it. It's grown on me a little bit. It's one of those things where I didn't like it at first. It's grown on me after some extended use. but it's still not my favorite. Oh, I don't have the auto shift turned on, so I'll go back into settings and turn that on. That's why it's not shifting into the landscape mode. But you know, it's grown on me a little bit, so I like the keyboard, and it's not nearly as bad as I had originally set. These are what the keyboards look like. You know, this one, the fact that it has a 4.3-inch display, in my opinion, makes it really easy to type on. The Sly Cat went to the bar and ordered. So the Sly Cat went to the Barney, I meant to say bar, and ordered 3 beers. So you have that, pretty easy to type on. You can use it in portrait or in landscape mode. I've turned this one off as well. I have a thing, like, I'm not a big landscape person, so I have a thing about turning that off whenever I get the device and I'm working with it. So let's make sure auto rotate screen is turned on. Let's go back into messages, and then you can see that's what the portrait, or the landscape keyboard, excuse me, looks like. And then, of course, if you're comfortable with installing third-party keyboards or anything of that nature, there are a bunch in the Android market. And if you really want to have fun and you're comfortable doing it, we don't condone it, obviously, but you can install things like the stock Android 2.1 keyboard or Motorola's multi-touch keyboard, things of that nature, which is what you just saw. But good keyboard there. On this front, I've been very pleased. It's 4-inch display, so it's a little bit smaller, and the keys are fatter than the older Android keyboard, so it may be hard to type on. That said, let me stop talking. Let me shut up and try to type. Logs. Outran. Sly. The Quick Brown Fox outran the Sly Kitty. So you can see quick typing there. No issue. But if you're not a fan of that, we can switch over to something like SwiftKey, which is available in the Android market, and you get the idea of what it looks like. So you have a couple of options on the keyboard front, depending on what you prefer. But I didn't like it at first, and it's definitely grown on me.